The Ottawa Senators, they're in a tough spot right now.
Yeah.
Sens fans were loving life last week. They were ripping off win after win after win. The team seemed to finally find its groove. But now both goaltenders are out. They're coming off a rough swing in Western Canada. It's not technically over yet. They still have to play Edmonton. And they're in a tough spot, man, this Senators team, because as close as they are to a playoff spot, it's still actually pretty far away.
Yeah.
Because they have a murderer's row of a schedule. And again, it starts tonight against the Edmonton Oilers. Then they play Colorado, Toronto, Pittsburgh, Boston, Tampa, New Jersey, Florida. That's just the next 8 or 9 games. And then the end of the season, they finish off. After that, they have a little bit of a one-game breathing room, Lepore, where they play Philly. And then they play Toronto. Okay, Columbus, that's another breather. And then they end the year, Carolina, Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Buffalo.
Yeah.
And right now, just looking at the standings, there are 5 teams ahead of the Ottawa Senators. And I know the Senators have some games in hand. They have a game in hand on Washington, a game in hand on Florida, 2 games in hand on the Islanders. But right now, Washington, Buffalo, Florida, the Islanders, and Pittsburgh are all ahead of Ottawa just in terms of pure points.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are the Ottawa Senators officially done, Lepore, or do they have a glimmer of hope left at this point?
I think they're done. And I don't mean that as an insult. I think oftentimes people look at records, points, and they look at the schedule, and they think of a record they have to put up to get to the playoffs or to win a division. And what people forget is that there are other teams. So in the position they're in, they're behind Washington now. They got the game in hand, but you got to win your game in hand. And they got Edmonton next. So who knows? It just gets to a point where with the teams you're trying to catch, you just run out of games. Because even say the Island, let's remove Buffalo, Florida, and who else is fighting?
And Washington.
Let's remove those teams. So you just focus on the teams that are in Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Ottawa's got to catch those teams. Okay. We've got 16 games to go. 16 games. Even if those teams go 8-6-2 or something,
they're probably still getting in.
Yeah. But Ottawa would have to, at that point, to catch 6 points, we'll have to go 11 something and something. This would be one of the best teams the last 15 games of the season. So it's no shot at them and what they're capable of. I just think they're at the point now where they've run out of games and there's too many teams in front of them where, and that's the thing people do too, right? We're only 4 points out of a playoff spot and they look at the team in the 8th spot. Yeah, but there's 2-3 teams in between. Teams are going to win games. Someone's going to get hot. All it takes is one and you're done. So props to the Sens. They made a charge. They got their fans and city excited for a little while, which is great. But I just think at this point they've run out of games, and we'll find out. I mean, we'll find out really soon because it's tonight. It's tonight they play Edmonton.
Yeah, they play the Oilers tonight.
Yeah, so they play the Oilers tonight, and then they have Colorado, and then us. You said.
Yeah, it's rough. They got Edmonton, Colorado, Toronto, Pittsburgh, Boston, Tampa, New Jersey, Florida.
It's crazy.
Those are their next games.
Yeah, and that's insane. Like I just said, if those teams above them even go 500, it's still going to take a hell of a record from Ottawa against those teams to get in. So, but I mean, if they lose tonight, then they got Colorado and us. This could have a stamp by the weekend, and we have it completely figured out. What do you think? You give my hometown Senators any chance at all, Bruno?
I think this team's going to fight because I think they have a lot of confidence right now. And I know that it hasn't gone well through Western Canada. They lost 5-1 to the Flames, 5-2 to Vancouver. Those are just bad losses. They did beat the Kraken 5-4, but then that 5-0 loss to Chicago, they've lost 3 of their last 4. I still think confidence-wise, this team feels like it's right in the mix. They can still get into the playoffs. They have a lot of talent on forward. But now they have no goalies left. They're down to their 3rd and 4th string goalies.
Yeah,
Thomas Chabot. Yeah. that's who they're going with in net.
Yeah.
Him and Sogard at this point. Like it's not great at this point of the season when you're
Bruno.
when you're dealing with this murderer's row of a schedule. But I think this team honestly still has some confidence, and I think they're going to fight. But as you said, Lepore, there's just not enough time left, man. There's not enough time. They got 16 games left, and there's 5 teams ahead of them. You got to hope that basically all those teams just shit the bed down the stretch, because even if the Sens have like a really strong finish of the season, as you said, like let's say they go 11-4-1, that might not be enough to get in. Even going 11-4-1, like all it takes is kind of Pittsburgh to continue doing what they're doing. The Islanders, now maybe you could make the argument that they could catch the Islanders because they still have 2 games in hand. But as you've been saying, Lepore, you still have to win those games. So you have those 2 games in hand. All right, you have Edmonton and Colorado, your next 2 games. Those are your games in hand. Have fun with that. You lose one of those games, you're behind the 8 ball again. Yeah. So it's going to be really tough. I think they're done as well, but I do think they are going to show some fight. This team plays really well at home. I think they're always going to have a chance to win on home ice. On the road, not so much, but they got some fight left in them. But Lepore, I agree. I think it's done at this point.
It's hilarious how quickly our mindset changes, right? Because here we were a week or 2 ago when they were kicking the shit out of everybody. And you were like, wow, they have those games in hand too. They're going to be tied. They're going to be in a playoff spot. And then they lose a few. And it's like, well, they're going to lose those games in hand. But your confidence just goes down. As for how they'll play out the rest of the season, earlier in the year, when things were going really bad for them, really bad, and they've been showing the graphs, the betting graphs, there were points where the Sens were like 25-1 to make the playoffs. Then it creeped down 15-1, 10-1, 8-1. Last week, I think it was as low as 6-1 or something. So they have made a charge. But when they were at their lowest point during the season, I made the point that we were going to find out what the Sens were made of, because you do have this young group. And let's face it, this group, they have a lot of talent. They seem like they're a close group, but they haven't won a lot. So I think that team, when I say that team, that organization, even if they didn't make the playoffs this year, they just wanted some positivity. So when things were looking really bad for them, like people were talking about Bedard and all that, if they should just tank it, trade away assets. Had things gone that way, it would have been really bad, really, really bad for the organization to look in the mirror, see what they have, and not see any real progress. And they were able to turn it around. They got hot. Stützle looks amazing. Tkachuk had a rough patch earlier in the season, 5-on-5. He's looked pretty good lately. And now, as grim as it looks for them making the playoffs, it's funny to say like the leaders on that team, like because they're young, like the Brady Tkachuks, the Stützles, the Shabots, if he's playing, if he's healthy. Even if they're not going to make it, I still think they have to fight to the end. They have to give the team some confidence going into next season. They have to keep the fans excited and the city excited for next season. This Sens team in the last year has had a lot of positive momentum. They had the DeBrincat trade. They had the Giroux signing. Great. Like I said, Stützle's had a great year.
Chychrun at the deadline.
The new ownership rumors, like everyone's talking about Ryan Reynolds. Complete 180 to where everyone thought the Sens were headed last year at this time. So I really hope, for the organization's sake and for the fan base's sake, that they can keep fighting to the end. So at least there can be some optimism for next season. Like, let's say they finish 10th. Okay, and that's a big improvement. I mean, there's going to be a big improvement regardless, but I just think it makes fans more optimistic. And wherever they finish, it's playoffs or bust next year. This group has to make the playoffs. Like, enough is enough. But just to give the fans and the organization the confidence to go into next season, I'm not going to say expecting the playoffs, but at least to know, like, yeah, we're in this. You don't want it to fall off the rails. And I'll say it, DJ is going to coach hard till the end, because if this thing does go off the rails, I mean, there's rumors about him getting fired. He's gone. So he has to at least show, hey, look where we finished, right? He has to show Pierre or whoever's going to be making that decision that he's capable of giving this team a chance to make the playoffs next year. So, like I said, I'm hoping they fight. I expect them to, because these guys like to score. They're young, and even if they're playing for nothing, they're still going to want to win and score goals and celebrate. They're going to want to kick the shit out of the Leafs on Saturday night, as they always want to for their fans. So I think it's going to turn out okay for them, and I really and truly hope it does.
Yeah, this season could have been a colossal disaster for Ottawa based on how it started. Like, bare minimum this year, I thought like this team has to at least sniff the playoffs
Yeah,
to have a successful season. And they have turned it around to that point where they're fighting for a playoff spot with 16 games to go. As grim as it looks, like they're still technically in the mix and they still have a puncher's chance to get in. And that's all positive. But man, you said it. Next season, it's playoffs or bust. Like, this is their team now. Mm-hmm. Your core is in place. And I always bring this back to the Leafs, and I know the Leafs are very rare. Like, they made the playoffs in year one of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. And then everyone wonders why those guys all got their money so early. Well, maybe it's because they were pretty fucking good since the second they stepped in the NHL and led their teams to the playoffs in year one. And guess what? The Leafs have made the playoffs every year since. Okay? And to the people who say they didn't make it in the COVID season, first of all, every team, and I don't know how many times I've had to tell people this on social media, all 24 teams who got invited back to the return to play plan that year were all considered playoff teams by the NHL. And on top of that, based on points percentage, the Leafs were in a playoff spot.
Yeah, more importantly, yeah.
Before they were in a playoff. The league was shut down due to COVID. So shut up to the people who say the Leafs didn't make the playoffs. They made the playoffs in 2020. Go check your facts. Just Google it. It's very easy to do. Anyway, the Ottawa Senators got to make the playoffs next year, man. Like, we're getting to the point now. Shabbat's already in year 5. Or Kachuk's in year 5. Shabbat's in year 6. Stützle's going to be in what, year 4 next year?
Year 4. He's getting paid next year. Yeah, he's out of his entry level deal.
My goodness, man. Like, you got a lot of talent here. Your core is in place. Like, you got to see results at this point. No more like, oh, we're just fighting to try to make the playoffs. Like, no, you have enough talent here that you got to get into the playoffs and threaten to win a round. And sure, make all the jokes you want. The Leafs haven't won a playoff series. But my God, this team has got to take a bigger step forward next season. Like, I think it's mandatory, or else, like, I don't know, man, it's going to be very, very disappointing in Ottawa.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, I mean, we talk a lot about the Sens. He's a big Sens fan. He was saying earlier in the year, even when things were bad, people start throwing out, okay, we should trade DeBrincat. Even people even brought up Giroux. It's like, what would we get for Giroux? He's on his contract, this and that. Trading Talbot. No matter where they were in the standings, and I think a lot of Sens fans felt this way, he didn't want them to make those types of moves because it would just show like, hey, we can't do this again. We can't like put up the white flag again. I don't give a fuck where we are in the standings. We got to keep fighting. And I respected that. And I respected a lot of the Sens fans for feeling that way. So I don't think many people could argue against what we're saying in the way that they're running out of runway, and we just really hope they fight to the end to keep this positive momentum going into next season, because next season is a big season, like you said, for the Ottawa Senators. They have to make it. They have to make it. Thomas Chabot, like you said, year 6 of his NHL career, this is the first time he's smelled even somewhat competitive hockey. Think about that for a second.
Even Brady Tkachuk, as much as everyone gushes over Brady Tkachuk, like, this dude's in year 5 now.
Yeah.
He's been around for a little bit. Like, you got to start showing some results and make the playoffs at some point.
Yeah, and to me, it's a thing. I don't know. You tell me, Bruno. To me, it's almost a thing of respect too. Like, maybe it sounds kind of funny. We almost have to respect them a little more to give them expectations. Like, sometimes with smaller markets, people are like, oh, that team's cute or whatever. No. When people make Team Canada rosters, some people put Chabot. And here's this guy. It's like, he wants to win. Everyone knows Brady Tkachuk wants to win. Tim Sluza is turning him into one of the better or best offensive players in the NHL. So even as outside fans, I think we kind of have to give them the respect in the way that our expectation is for them to make it, just like I hope Sens fans do.
Yeah, like, it's time. Next year, there are no more excuses. Like, I'm probably going to pick them to make the playoffs next year, at least be a wild card team.
So you said you're going to pick them?
Yeah, like, I'm going to pick them probably to make the playoffs next year.
Okay.
Like, when we do our show before the season, who's getting into the playoffs, who's going to win the divisions and whatnot, the President's Trophy, I'm probably going to have the Sens making the playoffs as a wild card team.
Okay.
And they should be fighting for a top 3 spot in the division. I don't know if they're they have what it takes to win the division. But my goodness, you got to get into the playoffs next year. So again, I think they're going to fight till the end, even though they're probably not going to get in. But as you said, it's going to be very important for the momentum heading into next season.